major warnings coming out on the WW3 front. All right, the president is coming out and essentially telling us that we're going to experience something huge. A huge problem is happening, and this is going to be a crisis for the United States and the United States military. That's what the president is coming out and saying. And we also have a U.S. flag officer coming out and giving us a warning. We're also seeing major military movements. The U.S. is moving military equipment, military hardware all over the globe, all right, setting up for a massive war, a massive global war. That's what the U.S., China, Russia, Iran are all setting up for, a massive global conflict. And we've had this, we had this small little sliver of peace, and we kind of took it for granted. All right, most of the world's history has been very violent and very just driven by war. There's always been a new war. There's always been people fighting over land, territory, resources. We've lived in this abundant era where we have enough resources to go around for everybody, so there hasn't been massive wars. But the globalists want to change that, all right? They want to, the French president even came out and said a few months ago that the era of abundance is over. Era of abundance is over. And it's true, all right? We are on the decline. Everything peaks. Every society peaks. Every civilization peaks. And we have peaked, and we are now on the decline. And the slope is going to get steep as we go down. We are going to accelerate, snowball as we go down, all right? So enough of the philosophical, theory, view of what's going on. All right, let's dive into the news. Let's dive into the raw news of what's happening. Lots of big stuff. This is crazy. Let's dive into this U.S. flag officer, all right? So he says, quote, "The big one is coming and the U.S. military isn't ready," all right? So it says, Russia's invasion of Ukraine revealed the fading power of America's military deterrent, a fact too few of our leaders seem willing to admit in public. So it is encouraging to hear a senior flag officer acknowledge the danger in a way that we hope is the start of a campaign to educate the American people. All right. And he said, quote, "This Ukraine crisis that we're in right now, this is just the warm-up." It's true. This is the test run for all the different countries to use the military hardware that they've been building the past 50 years. They want to use it against each other. They want to see, they have this, you have this, I have this. They are dry running, test running to see everyone's response times, everything. They're collecting so much data from these proxy wars that we're experiencing right now. They're collecting so much data on both sides to see how each side would react in a massive global war when it's direct conflict with these countries, all right? So he said, quote, "This is just the warm-up." And he said, quote, "The big one is coming. The big one is coming. And it isn't going to be very long before we are going to get tested in ways that we haven't been tested for, quote, a long time." That was all quote. So he said it's not going to be very long before we are tested in ways that we have not been tested. And he said the big one is coming, the big one. All right. And this is a Navy Admiral Charles Richard, commander of U.S. Strategic Command. All right. This is not a joke. This is a person that sees the intel, sees the military movement, can make calls on commands and movement of military personnel, equipment, and he is saying, quote, "The big one is coming." All right, that's pretty concerning to hear from the head, a commander of U.S. Strategic Command, all right? So also lots of big movement is happening with the United States. They are moving equipment all over the place. Russia is doing nuclear sub-tests lots of activity all around the world. So Russian nuclear submarine successfully test fires Bulava ballistic missile amid tensions with NATO, right? So this is a sub that fires ballistic missiles from the water. Anywhere in the world can move around and fire these ballistic missiles from the sub. Very serious, a nuclear sub. Very serious, very real threat. And they're testing it. They said the test was successful. All right. This also comes as the U.S. has deployed F-22 Raptors at the Kadena Air Force Base in Japan amid continued threats from North Korea and China. So much military movement activity is happening. The U.S. is setting up for a major global conflict with China and Russia, and it seems like China is one of the main targets coming from this. One of the main targets, all right? And we'll get to what the president warned of in just a second, because his warning is very extreme, very dangerous, and it just shows that we were right. Other people have been bringing this to the attention, to the forefront, that this is a major threat, and he's finally admitting it. And it's kind of too late. It's kind of too late. We should have did something 6 months ago when people were pointing this out. But let's get back into this. It says, on November 1st, 2022, the Japanese defense minister confirmed that a dozen F-22 Raptors would be deployed rotationally to the Kadena Air Base on the Japanese island of Okinawa. Right? So, U.S. is preparing for big things with China. It also says, the U.S. Air Force has deployed its B-1B strategic bombers to South Korea. So they have deployed their nuclear-capable long-range bombers, B-1B strategic bombers, to South Korea amid these escalations with North Korea, amid all of these missile tests, missile fires, all right? And it's very dangerous to have these nuclear bombers here. I understand the deterrence aspect of it, but if these bombers have nuclear-capable weapons on them, it's very dangerous to have them flying around North Korea. It says they were flying over South Korea, doing drills and tests with the South Korean military. If they are armed, which most likely they are, they always say these planes and stuff are not armed, but it's, what's the point of having this plane if it's not armed? What if if you got to push the button, you got to go to the base and pick up your nuke and then do it? Like, no, these planes are ready to go if they need to be deployed, if they need to be used, right? They don't just fly around for nothing. So it's very dangerous to have these aircraft flying around over South Korea and very close to North Korea when North Korea is firing off dozens of ballistic missiles per day the past week. One day, I believe they fired off 25 missiles. And what if one of them hits a plane, a nuclear bomber? What if North Korea sees these nuclear bombers and thinks they are a direct threat to North Korea's sovereignty because they're flying so close? You know what I mean? It's like the U.S. would not like North Korean nuclear bombers flying around in Mexico, right? That's my point. We would think that was a major threat. That would be national news. Everyone would be freaking out, and we would be threatening to shoot down this plane or take out this plane, you know? So that's essentially what North Korea could say they are reacting to. And they could have some kind of, like, they could justify in their own way, all right, to say, oh, we needed to attack these bombers. We thought they were coming into our airspace, all right? So very serious that this is happening. This also comes as flight tracker data had confirmed that 4 B-1 bombers also recently deployed to Andersen Air Force Base in Guam following a series of ballistic missiles launched by North Korea. All right, so there's nuclear bombers in Guam, bombers in South Korea. The U.S. just deployed nuclear bombers to Australia as well. Why are they moving all these nuclear bombers? Are they just doing it for fun? Or are they just moving around to waste gas, all right? Why are they doing this? Why are they putting all these strategic bombers in very strategic locations surrounding China and Taiwan, right? Very suspicious. It seems like this is a big buildup for a massive war with China and Russia. All right, so this also comes as Taiwan scrambled their jets and used and activated their missile systems after detecting 11 Chinese aircraft and vessels near their island. Taiwan readied their missile systems as Chinese aircrafts crossed the air defense identification zone. All right, so Chinese aircraft are just probing. They're seeing the response time. They're seeing how fast Taiwan scrambles their jets, how fast they can activate their missile defense systems when they enter their air defense zones. Probe, that's what I mean. We are in the beginning stages. This is all just data collection and people, all the countries figuring out before they make their move. Like this is a response time. This is what, like they are getting it down to the seconds. They're thinking, we will have 13 seconds to launch this ICBM once the U.S. does this, or you know what I mean? They're literally calculating things down to the second. Like if we do this and the U.S. does this, and we respond, you know what I mean? They are wargaming everything to the second because in situations like this, seconds are critical, right? That's why they were testing Taiwan's military response and crossing into their air defense zone to just, just to get a taste, just to get a probe. And it said the ominous message followed orders by Chinese President Xi Jinping last month to, quote, fully enhance training and, quote, preparation for war. All right? Fully enhance training and, quote, preparation for war. And I remember the speech he came out, he said blatantly that we will take back Taiwan any means necessary. We are ready to use any means to take back Taiwan if it comes down to it. So they are preparing for war, and the U.S. has openly said that they will defend Taiwan. The U.S. implemented all these chip sanctions on the U.S., and we know Taiwan is critical for these chips, all right? Big things are happening. Big stuff's going on. So let's get into the big news now because this is related to the chips. This is what this is all about, is the chips. Everything we use, even your debit card has a chip in it, okay? Your phone does, your computer, your car, every communication device, every electronic in our modern world, every weapon system, advanced weapon system has chips in it, right? It's critical. It's one of the most critical things. And let's dive into what Biden is warning us because the U.S. is essentially in a terrible position for a massive war with China. We know this is coming. The U.S. is preparing for it, but it's a little too late. It's a little, we should have been preparing a decade ago. We should have seen this coming a decade ago, that there's going to be a massive war with Russia and China eventually, all right? So let's dive into this article. Let's see what Biden is warning about because this is critical. This is going to bring down our whole military potentially, all right? So it says, U.S. President Biden talked about the problems faced by the U.S. in supplying missiles for Javelin anti-tank systems to Ukraine because of the shortage of computer chips required to manufacture them, all right? So the U.S. can no longer supply Ukraine with anti-tank Javelin missiles because we do not have the raw materials to develop the firing systems, all right? This is very scary, very real. What if a war broke out with Russia and China, kinetic war between Russia and China and the U.S. right now? What would that happen? The U.S. would be screwed. All of our weapon systems have been sent overseas to just be blown up. All right, is this like a big conspiracy or something? Who's even getting these weapons? Who even gets them all? Are we just like giving our weapons like to the Russians? Are we just like giving our technology to like the Russians and the Chinese? Like we're sending all this stuff over here into this black hole, and then it like sifts over into the Russian and Chinese intelligence, and they just get all of our military equipment, and they can just reverse engineer it. Like what's even really going on here? All right, because this is dangerous. This is very scary. I know that's, is that a theory? Is that one of these crazy theories? Who knows? I was reading a report that only a third of all of the military aid packages get to their determined destination that they need to go to in Ukraine. So there's a massive black hole of these weapons going to places where they're not supposed to be. And then this is U.S. military blood, sweat, and tears, U.S. economy, blood, sweat, and tears, U.S. taxpayer, and it's just like sending it to a black hole to just be thrown away when we need it for our military. All right. And it says, President Biden discussed the problems facing the U.S. defense industry during his speech in San Diego, California, about the need for revamping semiconductor production in the United States. He said, quote, earlier this year, I was at a Lockheed Martin plant in Alabama where they make Javelin missiles. Guess what? We had problems getting Javelin missiles to Ukraine because they didn't have chips. They didn't have computer chips. This isn't just Javelins. This is going to affect everything. Javelins are just the thing that are like used the most, that are replenished the most over there, that they drain down. So it's one of these things that we always have to send. But this affects everything. And he's even admitting that this is tied to the supply chain in China. China can just cut the supply chain off, screw us over at any moment. I've made this point before, how even the military vehicles, I've had people like debate me on this, say this isn't true. This is completely true. This is real. Biden's even admitting it now, that all of our vehicles, a lot of our equipment stuff is just like stock stuff with extra stuff added onto it, with military perks added onto it. All right. So if there's shortages in the normal economy, then there's going to be shortages in the military economy. And if supply chains disrupted in the normal economy from China, it's going to be disrupted in the military economy as well from China, right? A lot of stuff comes from China. We are completely vulnerable, and then we're also preparing to go to war with them, all right? Scary stuff. And he said, quote, or no, this was the U.S. Commerce Secretary also said that this is a national emergency, this chip shortage, right? So this is very serious, all right? It said, quote, quote, there are 250 chips or more in every Javelin missile launching system. 250 chips or more in every system. That is unsustainable to just be throwing away, to just be sitting over there and it's just destroyed. And this has only been 6-7 months, guys. This is going to drag out for years, and then we could see a massive military strike from Russia or China when we are completely depleted to nothing. All right. So said the U.S. Commerce Secretary Gina Raimondo, appearing before the Senate Committee on Commerce, Science, and Transportation for budget hearing. She called the chip shortage a national emergency. National emergency. This is a national security emergency. And they've recently passed a bill to start ramping up chip production in the United States, but not good news. It's going to take years and years for this chip production to actually start. So we'll get into that in just a second. So, quote, I talked to all the national defense contractors recently who are working overtime in the Ukraine replenishment issue, and their biggest pain point is chips, said Raimondo. She noted that the average semiconductor consuming industry has less than 5 days of inventory, even as the chip makers were operating at maximum capacity. So they only have 5 days of inventory, right? This is scary stuff. This is critical. This is just one of these things that sit in the background that makes the world go around. It's like diesel or gas. And we just take it for granted. We don't think about it. It's not on the radar. This is one of the things that makes the modern world work. And without these chips, we are completely going to be screwed, right? And so they're working on this bill. It said, however, starting manufacturing could take at least 5 years for the manufacturing facilities subsidized under the Biden administration's CHIPS Act. So they passed this CHIPS Act recently to give a bunch of funding to build U.S.-made chips, all right? Because the U.S. Used to produce like 40% of the world's chips, and now we only produce 1%, right? Very dangerous when we probably consume, 40% of them or something. We probably consume a massive massive amount of chips and we produce nothing. All right. So, quote, "It will take 3 to 5 years to even build these out, in some cases even longer," said Democratic Senator from Virginia Mark Warner, who chairs the Senate Intelligence Committee, while also stressing the need for subsidies to help shore up U.S. production capabilities. Quote, "If we haven't done this legislation, if this was not the law of the land, the one thing I could say unequivocally is that none of these facilities would be in America because it is cheaper to build in Asia." Right? Cheaper to build in Asia. And why is that? Why is that? Because we have exported all of our manufacturing and goods. This is intentional to China and overseas. And why do we even allow this? These people get paid ridiculously low wages. They want to talk about living wage. The wage that they pay people in China is a joke to work in these factories. It is inhumane. And a lot of people live in coffin apartments, okay? Which are essentially just little closets, like they're little, 10 by 10 closets, little storage units that people live in. And it's called a coffin apartment, right? And that's all they can afford because they're giving this slave wage in China. And then China uses that to exploit the global economy, saying, oh, it's cheaper to make it here because we just use slave labor, essentially slave wages, to develop your product. And then we'll just sell it back to the United States for the people that make more money. This is a dystopian, messed up system. And we're paying the consequences, paying the price for it now. The piper's being paid now. Chicken's coming home to roost now. At a critical moment when we're on the edge of a war with China and Russia, we're depleting our military stockpile. And now we don't have any manufacturing. During World War II, we were able to say, get all these factories going, build all this stuff, get all this. We can't do that anymore. We don't have that ability anymore. We can make a bunch of masks or something. We can make something like that maybe, right? But we cannot build a bunch of military equipment on a moment's notice that's going to be efficient and the highest quality that the U.S. military needs, right? That doesn't exist anymore. The supply chain is completely screwed, right? And it says, even when they build all these facilities, it's going to take 3 to 5 years. Good luck. War with China is going to pop off way before that. Experts opine that tens of thousands of new specialist engineers will be needed for the U.S. domestic semiconductor industry to catch up with Asia. The estimate is about 80,000 new engineers in 5 years. That's a lot of people in a short period, quote. That's what the Energy or the Commerce Secretary said. So we need 80,000 new semiconductor chip manufacturing engineers in 5 years. This is weird. I'm sorry, but this is just insane. How to just average people, people on YouTube, people in comments, everyone, how to people you talk to, your brother, your sister. How can we think of this stuff, think in foresight, we are depleting our arsenal. We are vulnerable to China, our supply chain. China is shutting down their cities all the time and their supply chain. How can we think of this foresight, but our leaders have no foresight until it's down to the wire, and then they say, oh yeah, it just has to really slap them in the face before anything's done. All right, so let me know what you guys think about this. This is completely vulnerable. We are completely vulnerable to Russia and China, okay? And this does not look good. The commander of U.S. Strategic Command is warning us. The president's warning us. All this military movement, big things are happening, guys. So let's hope there's peace in the world. All right, we do not want this, but we know how these global wars work. They're funded by both sides. And we know how this works. We know it's just one of these things. When it happens, it just happens. So thank you guys for watching. Please stay prepared. And you guys have a big old blessed day.